All right, this is question number 6. Write two expressions for the perimeter here. So part A says use all four side lengths to write the perimeter of this figure. Remember, the perimeter of a figure is found by adding all the sides. So in this case, we just have to show an expression that we're adding these four things. So if I wanted to use all four side lengths, notice they want you to fill in the blanks. All you have to do is show that you're adding these four things. So here's an example. Perimeter equals 17x plus 15 plus 5x plus 8x. And note, when we're adding terms, it doesn't matter which one you start with. You can start in any order. As long as you're adding all four parts together, that will represent the perimeter, and you'll get that part A correct. And now part B is what we're working on this week, which is simplifying expressions by combining like terms. So looking at the expression you wrote in part A, they want you to simplify it. How do we simplify it? Look for the like terms. So I can see here like terms have to have this identical variables. So we have a 17x, a plus 5x, and a plus 8x. So to simplify this expression, we just have to add these three terms together. And when I add 17x plus 5x plus 8x, we get 30x. This is a constant. There are no other constants, so I'm just going to bring that down. And this will be my simplified expression. Again, you don't solve anything. When you simplify by combining like terms, once you combine the like terms, you're all set. And you would leave this as your final answer for part B. All right, now question number 7 is simplifying by combining like terms. So notice in this case, these have the same variable and the same exponents. If that's the case, you look at the coefficients, which are -5 and +8. You just add them in this case. So I just got to do -5 plus 8, which gives me a +3. And I make sure I keep the variable u squared. And that'll be my final answer. So again, like terms, as long as the variables and exponents match, you just combine their coefficients. And then whatever is your final answer, you're done. All right, next example, question number 7, it says to simplify this expression. Again, notice we have same exact variables, which means we have to add these coefficients, 1/2 plus 2/5. Now, since I have to add fractions, and these are different denominators, we have to find a common denominator. So this is a throwback question to earlier in the school year. So my denominators are 2 and 5. If I did the multiples of 2 and the multiples of 5, I could see the least common multiple for these two would be 10. So that means, what do I have to check here? What do I multiply 2 by to get 10? This will be times 5. I'll do the same to the numerator. What do I have to multiply this to make it into a 10? Times 2, and then do the same to the numerator. And now we're just going to simplify. So I get 5 over 10 plus 4 over 10. And when you add these up, you get 9 over 10. So again, same variables. We just add the coefficients. 1/2 plus 2/5. I get 9/10, and I just got to make sure to attach the variable to that. So 9/10 x is my final answer. All right, now we are on question number 9. So again, simplify by combining like terms. So what you want to do is look for variables that have the same letter and exponent. For example, notice this is a 6x and this is a 5x squared. These are not like terms. But this here, x squared and x squared, these match up. Same variable, same exponent, which means that this and this are like terms. So that means I would have to combine these two, 14 minus 5. So you only have to pay attention to the coefficients. 14 minus 5, I get 9. And I'll keep my variable, the x squared variable. Then I look at what's left. So I have a 8, which is a constant, meaning there's no variable. Then we have a 6x and then a 12, another constant. So this constant, -8, is going to be combined with the -12. So -8 minus 12 is going to give me -20. And then the last term, plus 6x, I'll bring that down. And I am all set. And you could also tell from my final answer that these are not like terms and this is not like term with either of these. So again, that's how you know when your expression is simplified, there are no like terms left. And then the very last question involves two things. We're going to be using the distributive property, so distribution, and we also have to combine like terms. So anytime you have to do both of these in the same problem, you're going to distribute first. So notice here, this is probably going to be one of the most complicated ones you'll do. You're going to distribute here because this is being multiplied with this in the parentheses. So these have to be multiplied by a -2. Notice that's a negative. Pay attention to that sign. It's a -2 we have to distribute. So what I will do is here, I'll rewrite -x. And now, -2 times these two. In other words, almost like ignore the -x. We're distributing a -2. So essentially, we're working with this here. -2 times a -y is a +2y. And if I were to ignore this, negative 2 times positive 3 is a negative 6, and I keep the variable. So when you distribute the negative 2, you get 2y minus 6x. Notice this is a positive, it's a positive 2y. Negative times negative comes out to be positive. So when I show this work, we got positive 2y, and then that became a negative 6x, so minus 6x. Notice this is not in the parentheses, so we just got to bring that down, plus 7y. Once you distribute, your next step is to combine like terms, if they exist. Here I have an x here, and I have another x here, so I got to combine these two together. So this is, remember, if you don't see a variable or a number, a coefficient, it's really just a 1. So negative 1 minus 6 is negative 7, and I keep my variable x. And now we combine the y's together, because this is a y and this is a y. So positive 2 plus 7 is positive 9y. This is an x, this is a y. These are not like terms, so that'd be my final answer. So as a side note, just point out, if you do get any of these wrong, the first thing you should check for is the signs, because if you do make a mistake, it's most likely going to be your signs. Like, in other words, when you multiply a negative with a negative, you might put down a negative as your answer when it should be positive. So check your signs if you do get the wrong answer. And I'm just going to do a couple more examples of this one, because, again, this will probably be the one that will give you the most difficulty out of all the problems, because, again, we are doing distributive property and combining like terms all in one problem. So in this example here, I'm distributing a negative 3 here. So negative 3 times negative 4w. Negative times negative is positive, and 3 times 4 is 12, so I get 12w here. So almost like if you ignore this, now we have negative 3 times a negative 2, which is positive 6x. So this distribution is taken care of in the first part. Now I move on to the next part. So you almost have to like ignore this. All this here we just did, ignore that, and now we're distributing a negative 5. So negative 5 times negative 7 is positive 35x. And again, once you do that first distribution, if you ignore this, it's negative 5 times the negative w, which is a positive 5w. And if you survive that first part, the rest is just going to be combining like terms. So 12w and 5w are like terms. So 12, and pay attention to the signs, 12w plus 5w is 17w. And then what's left? Positive 6x plus 35x. And when you add these two together, you're going to get positive 41x. And then these are not like terms, so that's your final answer. And then we'll do one more example to finish up this quiz review. So here, notice that we have minus in front of the parentheses, but there's no number to distribute. So what I do in this case is I think of, when I distribute the minus, everything here is going to become opposite sign. In other words, I'm going to have 5y. And then when I distribute the negative, this is going to make this here the opposite of negative 4z, which is positive 4z. And then if I distribute the negative over here, it's going to make this sign opposite, which is minus. And then it's going to be 6y. And once you take care of the distribution, you bring down the last term, minus 6z. And you have survived the first part. Another way to think about it is, if you don't like thinking about making these opposites, is to just put a 1 here. Because essentially what you're really doing is you're distributing a negative 1 here. So each of these terms are going to be multiplied by negative 1. So again, this is not a part of this, so I'm just going to bring down that term, 5y. And then now I'm going to do negative 1 times negative 4, which is a positive 4z. And then negative 1 times positive 6y is negative 6y. And then this is not a part of the parentheses, so I'm just going to bring that term down. And that is the first part. So notice that we get the same answer as before. So here I'm just thinking about it as making everything opposite signs. Over here, I just put this into a 1 and just multiply everything by negative 1. Whichever method you prefer, they both come up with the same answer. And once again, if you survive that first part, the rest is just like terms. So look for the same variables. So 5y minus, so always look at the signs, 5y minus 6y is negative 1y. And then I have the 4z, a positive 4z, minus 6z. So 4 minus 6 is negative 2z. Notice these are not like terms, so once you get to this part, you're all set. But another thing to keep in mind is if one of your coefficients is a 1, we don't have to put it. We could just leave it as negative y minus 2z. So even though these are equivalent, meaning it's not wrong if you put it this way, you're most likely going to see your answers this way without the 1. So that takes care of the 10 questions to expect on this week's quiz. So notice we have some evaluating with some older stuff we worked on earlier in the previous quizzes. So the only way to get better at these things is just to make sure is work on it as many times as possible. So if you complete all 10, get them correct, I would go through and run it back again and try to get all 10 correct again, all the way until Friday, which is when you have your quiz. So the more you practice, the better off you'll be.